Here's my map. Yours probably looks different, but I'll tell you a couple quick things about what I did, and then we'll move on to Print Composer. The first thing I did was I decided that the Google satellite image was just too strong. I found that this was less compelling. I wanted the black to stand out more. So the first thing I did was I said, okay, I don't like the Google image being so strong. You might have noticed that Google Satellite and all of these kind of open layers plugin um, options, there's no transparency or property setting on them. They're a web service. Um, so in order to kind of try to make it look more diminished and less loud, I added every county but Lincoln County as a black color that was semi-transparent, so it kind of softens the rim like that, right? So that was good, but I still felt like inside Lincoln County was also too, it was too loud. So I added a Lincoln County filter, this being a white semi-transparent fill. But then I still kind of wasn't too happy. This doesn't look bad, but I wanted to show the variation of land cover a little more. So I added the main land cover data set with a slight transparency on that too. And that transparency blends with the Google image and I think gives a little bit more character to the landscape. If you had a problem with the labels for the towns, I don't know if you remember the towns, for instance, in Bremen, it was saying Bremen, 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 one for every island. Well, there's a tool that we used in these tutorials that I'll just say, quote unquote, dissolved that issue. So I hope that you figured that out and kind of came up with a different way so that there's only one label per town. What I did next was I said, well, it'd be nice to have the label for the town be right next to or on top of the label of the number of acres of wetland in that town. So to do that, I labeled, of course, towns alone. This is my dissolved layer, and I only symbolized the edge with this kind of dot dash symbology. I made it hollow so we could see our base information. And I also labeled that with all caps. I'll show you really quick. All caps, white, so it's all uppercase. And the position that I put that in was around the centroid, offset from the centroid. The centroid just means this place right in the middle of a polygon. It kind of measures the geometric center of that polygon. And the towns layer with a town label right here, I set that above, and then I copied this whole thing and then just switched this from town to acres. And I had to join this information of the acres to the town by using the wetlands dissolve layer. So I used the attribute table of our wetlands dissolve, and I joined that to the towns layer so I could label it and have it be exactly in the same place. I could just label it from the wetlands layer, but this wouldn't be near the centroid of the polygon. If I labeled the wetlands acreage by this layer, it would try to find a centroid based on the actual wetlands polygons. So that's all I did there. And there's a lot of particularities about labeling that we're going to get into, but placement and the text style, and then the halo is the last thing that you should probably know about. For the towns layer, if I don't have a halo, it doesn't look bad. You probably don't notice it here in Newcastle and Damariscotta, but watch this Knox County island. You see how it gets interrupted by the town border, and Noblesboro and Jefferson kind of go into the lake a little bit. And when I add a halo like this, I'm going to hit apply and watch this down here. it gets a little better. You probably can't quite see it, but that's the idea, is that you don't really want to see the halo. The halo is going to be as close to a neutral color as the background as you can be. So I put a dark green in there because most of the background is a dark green. The last thing that I did with my symbology was I went into the main land cover data set and changed the mudflat value, or the low tide value here. It was pink, and I decided to make it gray, so it looked more like mudflats or rocks. I'm going to go into the Print Composer now, and it's the last window that we're going to try to learn how to use, but it takes a little bit of time. It still has a few bugs. It's the one part of the program that I would say is maybe still under development. But in order to do that, we go up to Project, and we're going to add a new Print Composer. This is like it's not a separate file, but it's kind of the way that QGIS has us illustrate, like Illustrator or InDesign or Inkscape. It's the way we get our map ready to show everybody else and put it on a piece of paper. So, new Print Composer, and I'm going to call this Lincoln Wetlands. I'm going to say OK. I get this new window, and I see a page here. And every item that I put in this page will have these options here. And item properties, just like in QGIS when we look at the properties, this is kind of the most important tab to look at, that in composition. So my page composition, I want to change this from A4. These are all metric kind of paper sizes. We're in the US, and so we like to use inches. I'm going to use ANSI A, which is letter, 8.5 by 11. It's kind of the United States standard, and you can see that looks pretty good. I'm going to use a portrait orientation because I think Lincoln County kind of runs north-south, and I want to try to maximize on the page. I want to see as much map as possible. So I've made a portrait landscape here. My mouse wheel zooms in and out like that. And the one kind of problem I ran into when I started making this video is that we're using a web service here. And so in order to actually have this web service line up with our other data, there's a little bug, but you just have to make the map, when you load the map into the page, it has to be the exact same size as the page if you want the layers to line up. So make note of that if you don't use a Google Satellite image or any of these web open layers products, you can just you can drag and drop here with the add new map. You could just any size square. But if you're going to use a web service, the open layers web service, you need to make this box exactly the size of the page for it to line up with your vector layers. So I started at 0, 0. I'm not going to get it perfectly with my cursor, but in comes the map, right? And the map came in with this button right here, Add New Map. You can see the bounding box around the edge. What I'm going to do is go to the item properties, the map properties, and I'm going to go down to position and size because on my web search I realized that that issue was that I needed to make the map the exact size of the Print Composer piece of paper. And 0, 0, that's good. That's exactly the origin, which is in the upper left here. I don't know if you can see that. And if I scooch this up or down, you can see it moving right here. So we want it to be at 0, 0. And the width and height should be the exact same width and height in millimeters as the composition. So 215.90 is the width. So 215.90, and then 279.40. So 279 that's pretty close, 0.40. And so everything should be happy now. The one thing I don't like though is it's not centered. So right below my normal selection tool is Move Item Content. So this is going to let me recenter the map. I'm going to click right in the center of Lincoln County, bring it up to the middle. That's pretty good like that. I kind of care more about central Lincoln County, so I'm going to zoom into that. And the way I do that is by changing the scale over here. Right now the scale is this random number based on my page size and some other things, but we haven't gone over it yet. But the way scale changes, think about it for a second. If I say the scale is 1 to 1, that means 1 inch on the page is 1 inch on the ground. That would be a pretty ridiculous map. But the larger the number of the scale, the larger this number gets, kind of the smaller the ratio. So right now, 1 inch on this map is 380,224 inches in the real world. So if I want to zoom in, this number gets smaller. If I want to zoom out, this number gets bigger. So I want to zoom in to central Lincoln County, and I'm going to try 200,000, 1 to 200,000. So I did 200,000, and that looks pretty good to me. Next thing I want to do is I want to add a title. So I'm going to go over here to, it says add ellipse, but this is really just adding shapes. So I want to add a rectangle, I think is what I want to do. And I'm going to go to the upper left and make a rectangle like that so that the title can sit on top of the map a little bit. And just because I want to make it look a little, sexier, I think I'm going to go down here to rendering. Right, you'll have to explore this a little bit, but under rendering, you can adjust the transparency of any object in your Print Composer. So what if I just give this, 10% transparency? Maybe a little more. How about 15? Yeah, that kind of looks nice. And I think I'm going to get rid of the border and just have it be a simple white box. So I'm going to get rid of this border. I can do it right here as well. No pen. Okay. And I'm going to add another box for a description. And now I will add, here's a button to add text. Add new label, and I'm going to have both my description and my title from that. You'll notice that when you type, you need to type over in your properties dialog. Okay, so after playing with text and boxes and make sure you do most of your edits in the properties, I'm going to change one more thing. I think that this map is pretty, but I want to soften it so that the title and the description stand out a little bit more. In order to do that, I'm going to go to my item properties, and down at the bottom under rendering, you can always change the transparency of whatever your object is. So what if I make this, let's make it 20. That's not bad. 10, 30 is probably too much. I'm just going to make it 20% transparent. I think that's kind of nice. So now that I'm ready to export, and don't forget that you should usually include your data sources and that kind of thing. The Google Web Service will usually automatically put its own logo on the bottom. We're going to go up to here, and you can save as a PDF or as an image. You might get this dialog box that says advanced composition effects such as blend modes for vector layer transparent are enabled in this project, which cannot be printed as vectors. Printing as a raster is recommended. So you might need to print as an image occasionally if you use a ton of transparency settings. But let's try it anyway. Okay, there's our map. If you're unhappy with the transparency settings, it looks like that still worked because I can see the transparency below there, below that white square. I think this looks pretty good. So that's from nothing to a complete map. If you want, print it off and we can look at each other's maps when you come into class.